Most weapons announce their threat. A gun, a knife, a club. I mean, you see the danger, you react. These aren't that obvious. They don't fire, they don't pierce, and they don't really look dangerous. They almost masquerade as everyday things. They fit in your pocket, and yet they've been illegal longer than most of us have been alive. One was banned nearly 200 years ago, and it's still being seized at airports today. I'm gonna let you know where that is and where it shows up. It's closer to the end. Today, I'm revealing 3 and why those in power decided you couldn't be trusted with them. Now, first, we're starting with the sap. My grandfather was a Pittsburgh cop in the 30s and 40s, and one of the things he carried every day wasn't just a gun, it was a sap. 6 inches of stitched leather with a chunk of lead inside. No blade, no trigger, just a tool meant to end fights fast. And today, you get caught with it, you're looking at felony charges in half the country. So how did something so simple and so common end up banned in more states than actual firearms? But first, let's get into what it is and why they exist. A sap is basically a short leather pouch filled with lead or dense metal. They feel a lot heavier than they actually look. They have a flexible handle used for short-range controlled strikes. Now, humans have always used weighted strike tools. From medieval flails to Ottoman riot sticks, the idea is simple. A flexible handle, heavy head, maximum control. In modern times, saps became standard issue in the early 1900s, carried by beat cops, train conductors, and military police. As I was told, they were designed to drop a drunk without killing him. I've lightly used the sap my grandfather carried on my hand. It felt like I rearranged the bones. So they hurt. Most people today only recognize saps from old noir films. The detective stepping out of the shadows, quick strike knocking the perp out, and the thug crumples to the ground. Not even loud. That was a sap. If you've watched The Untouchables, LA Confidential, or The Big Sleep, you've seen it in action. A quiet tool that could end a fight before it even started. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was decisive, and that's why Hollywood loved showing it. And why the public never forgot the image. Now, by the 1970s, saps weren't just riding in a cop's belt. Gangsters and street crews were carrying them too. Cities like New York and Chicago were seeing muggings where a single sap strike left victims unconscious in seconds and possibly damaging their brain. Now, newspapers ran headlines about lead-weighted weapons of the underworld, and politicians panicked. Now, instead of cracking down on criminals who misused them, lawmakers took the shortcut. They outlawed the object itself. Now, in California, just having a sap in your pocket can mean a felony. And in New York, it's illegal to even keep one locked in the trunk of your car. Now, comment below, have you ever seen or used a sap? All right, on to the second one. Now let's move on to blackjacks. I feel like people get this mixed up with saps, but they're very, very different. Think a steel bar or an industrial spring covered in leather, wrapped in leather. It's heavier, stiffer than a sap, and designed for destructive, disabling hits. Now, we know variants of blackjacks existed in ancient Roman, Greek, and Ottoman eras. They're compact, club-like weapons made of leather, wood, or metal, used by bodyguards, tax enforcers, soldiers, and ultimately criminals. By the 1920s, blackjacks were used by private detectives, organized crime, and off-duty cops. Think of the mob movie or shows like Boardwalk Empire or The Untouchables. If someone's got softened up, it was a blackjack. Not to be mistaken with the smaller sap that someone sneaks up from behind with. If the sap was for quiet work, the blackjack was for breaking up a fight. Not only were they more rigid, but the spring handle made it so you had an extra snap on impact. It's effective, brutal, and silent. Blackjacks were fine until civilians carried them. Then they were suddenly a gang weapon. During the 1960s and 70s, rising fears over inner city crime shifted the narrative. What had once been a symbol of authority and control turned into a symbol of street violence. Lawmakers responded by banning the tool itself while carving out exceptions for police. Even today, more than 20 states still prohibit blackjacks outright unless you wear a badge. Now, this third one is an actual tool that was used by sailors for centuries. Slungshots, not to be mistaken with slingshots. Now, a slingshot is basically a rope or a paracord with weighted knot or steel ball on the end. Now, they were used by sailors as a tool. They were throw lines or rigging work, basically grabbing ropes and stuff like that, and later adapted for self-defense and mugging, especially when they went on shore. Rope and weight weapons go back to biblical times. We know this, like David and Goliath, David's sling, same idea, and even ancient sailors used weighted lines for a variety of reasons, as well as to board ships and defend themselves. In the 1800s, American dock workers and sailors carried them for work, but started using slingshots as self-defense. But criminals, some of them were dock workers, picked them up too, since they were fast and cheap to make and easy to hide. Florida banned them in the 1860s. The law stayed in the books until 2016. Really, the only people using it were 1800 sailors, dock workers, riverboat crews, and the likes. This was more of an early urban crime thing. Now, when police were starting to arrest people around those times, they started noticing everybody had them in their pockets. Now, since every criminal seemed to have one, politicians came after it. But now you can find them as keychains, a little paracord ball, which the TSA still seizes from travelers. Now, unlike saps or blackjacks, the slingshots never really made it into pop culture. You don't really see detectives or gangsters using them on screen. No film noir knockouts, no mob movies, and because Hollywood never turned it into an icon, the public never questioned the ban. It just stayed buried in the law books, forgotten and unchallenged. I mean, personally, there's something about saps that just grabs me. They're deceptively small. They don't look like much, but when that weight connects, it makes a person instantly reevaluate whatever bad idea they just had. But now I'm dying to know, which of these would you carry? Now, if you carry a gun, check us out at relaxfittactical.com. We make concealed carry shorts and sweatpants that work with holsters you already own. Links and products down below. You'll find the shirt there too. And don't be lame, subscribe.